Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. I'm Betsy Brennan, President and CEO of the Downtown San Diego Partnership. The Downtown Partnership is a nonprofit organization focused on advancing the economic prosperity and cultural vitality of downtown through membership, advocacy, and public services. On behalf of the Downtown Partnership and our sponsor, Kavanack and Associates, who you will hear more from in just a bit, we want to welcome you to our first session of the year for our Fed and Educated series. Fed and Educated is designed to help businesses thrive by engaging industry experts to share their knowledge and offer turnkey solutions to some of today's most prevalent business challenges. As you know, today's discussion is going to focus on business and workforce survival and making the shift from COVID-19 response to recovery. We hope you leave this conversation with updates on local and state guidelines and policies for returning to work, while also receiving resources and strategies to help you identify short-term actions and a long-term vision to guide your organization's transition from a state of crisis response to a state of recovery. Since last summer, I've been serving on Mayor Gloria's Back to Business Task Force and chairing the Small Business Subcommittee. On March 5th, we shared our 6 priorities that focus on revving up the economy in a safe manner with an emphasis on a City of San Diego culture focused on human-centered design, innovation, problem solving, and data-informed equity solutions. Last week, Mayor Gloria announced that his Back to Business San Diego task force will serve as the blueprint to strengthen San Diego's economy with the federal aid incoming. As I mentioned, today's session was made possible by Kavanack and Associates. Kavanack is an independent, locally owned, based right here in downtown San Diego, commercial insurance broker that manages risk and negotiates insurance on behalf of its clients, and a valued longtime member of the Downtown San Diego Partnership. With that, I will pass things over to Natalie Sherrod, risk advisor, Kavanack and Associates, for a brief message. Natalie, the floor is yours. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much. And thank you for having me. As you mentioned, my name is Natalie Sherrod with Kavanack. I really wanted to thank the Downtown Partnership for allowing us to be here and to be a partner to the group, no pun intended there. Kavanack's approach is really an all-encompassing approach to risk management and insurance placement. We have a proprietary process that we go through with all of our clients to help analyze and then control the risks involved in all of your businesses, and then find ways to mitigate those costs. This really allows us to engage at a deeper level with our clients and helps our clients take a more proactive approach and not be at the risk of market trends and rates as they tend to be. One thing that will be sent out with the summary, as well as I believe in the chat box, is just a link to our insights page, as well as a specific article with regards to insurance trends for 2021. You may or may not know or have seen, but unfortunately rates are consistently going up across almost all lines of coverage. COVID is not helping that situation. So the approach that we take with our clients really helps to offset some of those risks and gives our clients a more proactive approach to managing that. So again, thank you so much for having us, and happy to be here.
I apologize. I was having a little bit of technical difficulty there. Let's get this show on the road. Thank you so much, Natalie. I'm now going to hand it over to my colleague, Marshall Anderson, Vice President of Government Affairs at the Partnership, who's going to serve as today's moderator. Marshall, take it away.
Thank you, Betsy and Natalie. Today is St. Patrick's Day. As you'll see in a second, Danny's got the green on. A big top of the afternoon to everyone joining us for today's conversation around business and workforce survival, making the shift from recovery to reopening. As a matter of housekeeping for today's session, please keep an eye out on your chat boxes, as we will be sharing a lot of resources down there to go along with today's discussion. We also encourage you to submit any questions you may have using the Zoom Q&A feature that you'll find down below. We'll try to get to as many of those as we can. All right, let's get started. We've brought together 3 individuals whose expertise and organizations have proved invaluable throughout this past year. Chris Earl is the Southern California Regional Advisor for the Office of the Small Business advocate. Daniel Fitzgerald is the acting regional director of the San Diego and Imperial counties Small Business Development Center Network. And Juli Moran serves as managing partner and managing director of Deloitte Consulting's San Diego office. Thank you all for being here. Perhaps we could have each of you say a little bit about yourself, the organization you represent, and any valuable information, resources, and strategies available to our local businesses and workforce. Chris, why don't we go ahead and start with you?
All right, awesome. Thank you, Marshall, and thanks for having me and including me in today's event. And give me one moment to share my screen and I'll get into my presentation. There we go. All right, can you see my screen okay?
Yes, we can. Thanks,
All right,
Chris.
Perfect. All right. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Again, I'm Chris Earl, I'm the Southern California Regional Advisor for the California Office of the Small Business Advocate. And I'll give you some background into our office. We're an independent office within the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development. We have priority areas and focus that I'll explain in more detail in some of the later slides, but our main priority areas are advocacy, the advocacy, development of resources and tools for small businesses to start, grow, and manage their businesses. And here is our mission and objectives, and I won't read this verbatim, but it's basically for us to provide and develop networks and the ecosystem and provide access to markets, capital, and resources, as well as networks so that California's small businesses can be resilient and grow. And I harp on the resilient word. That's kind of the key word in this whole passage here in terms of how we've all had to kind of weather the COVID storm, so to speak. And as we kind of look towards the reopening and some of the strategies and things we'll work on as a state to kind of move forward with that. And here on the next slide is just a visual of our California Business Center network. You could actually visit the center that's closest to you by visiting business.ca.gov/centers. And at each of those centers, which we are partnered with our federal partners from the California Small Business Development Center, as well as the California Women's Business Center networks. Actually, Daniel, presenting after me, will kind of give you some details about his programs and kind of how they support small businesses there. But this is just a visual of our statewide network. But within those networks, there's trainings, webinars, and one-on-one advising. And I won't steal any of Danny's thunder on that, so I'll move on quickly to the next slide. And so right here is just some of our recent programmings that have come from the overall umbrella of GoBiz. As I mentioned earlier, we're an independent office and we're the small business team. So we focus on advocacy programs for small businesses. But here I just wanted to highlight the CA Rebuilding Fund, which provides affordable lending and services for small businesses. And the website's there, and please don't write any of these links down. I'll make sure the slides are available for anyone listening in. And then the second program here is our recent sales tax relief and Main Street small business hiring tax. I think your local CalBiz person here is Sam Nejibat. He's your local representative, and he's the expert on all of our tax relief programs. And again, if you need to find, Sam or anyone from his team, just please visit business.ca.gov, and you can, navigate to the appropriate service there. And then last but not least is kind of, I guess you could say the most popular of programs right now is the Small Business COVID-19 Relief Grant Program, which essentially is providing micro grants to small businesses between $5,000 and $25,000 to eligible small businesses and nonprofits. And the key, actually, we just started around on the 16th, yesterday, which is specifically for nonprofit cultural institutions. And so, there's a lot of questions around eligibility. Please visit the careliefgrant.com website because there's actually specific eligibility language, which I would just I wouldn't do it justice to try to explain that here in this setting, but there's, this current round will last until the 23rd, and then we'll have a round round 4, which will be an open round. Well, actually round 5, which will be an open round for new applicants, as well as those that are existing on the wait list from some of the earlier rounds. So I'll dive a little bit more into that program here on these slides. And again, the grant awards are up to $25K for eligible small businesses. As I mentioned, round 3 just closed last week, which was a round dedicated specifically for waitlisted applicants. So for example, if your business, if you applied in any of the previous rounds and you were notified that you're on the wait list, that round 3 that just closed was dedicated specifically for those businesses. And so, you know, if it happened that you were not selected for that round, you will be automatically rolled into the subsequent rounds. But just wanted to highlight that because I know there's a lot of questions about, hey, I applied, I haven't heard anything. So I just definitely wanted to highlight that and bring attention to that. And again, as I mentioned, round 4 is going right now until March 23rd. And then round 5 begins March 25th, which again is an open round for all new applicants, as well as the waitlisted applicants who were not previously funded. And then there will be a subsequent 6th round, which dates have not been released on that. So we essentially, and I want to tie this in with the existing state, you know, budget approval. And so the governor proposed an additional $2.075 billion for small businesses as part of this package. And so that funding is directly correlated to rounds 3, 4, 5, and 6. The previous rounds from 1 and 2 were specifically allocated out of the previous year's budget, which was about $500 million in those first 2 rounds. And so the subsequent rounds are directly correlated to the proposed budget that was just approved by CA legislature. So those grants are going out now. We're not wasting any time with that. So, you know, if you're interested small business and haven't applied already, please make note of the dates and get your application in as quickly as possible. And again, if you have any issues with that process, feel free to email me. I'll provide my contact information on the last slide. And quickly, because I spent a lot of time on that slide, Lendistry, and I can't forget them, as well as our partners. Lendistry was awarded the RFP to disperse the funds to the small businesses across the state. They are our intermediary, which is a CDFI mission lender, as well as our 500 partners across the state. Without them, this program would not be possible without Danny and his team and staff and the hard work that they put in to help these small business owners get their applications in and submitted, to the tune of about 350,000 applications were submitted through the first 2 rounds. So a lot of work done, a lot of long hours, and a lot of time spent with our business owners and hand-holding to make sure that applications were in and completed, and all the subsequent, you know, things that come with that. So definitely wanted to provide a shout out to Danny and his group. They're a phenomenal team. They always do phenomenal work, but definitely want to highlight them again. And again, just back to our office, CalOSBA, which I refer to our office, we're the small business team. We're the advocate and the voice for small business. And our focus areas, which I mentioned earlier, are access to capital, access to connections. And so there's some links related to state and federal programming, but also access to markets. And this is where kind of some of the specificity comes in. My statewide priorities are supply chains and procurement, as well as innovation. So I've, you know, definitely have spent a lot of time in working and collaborating with the folks here in San Diego. But I think that from a statewide perspective, supply chains and procurement are like one of our top priority areas as we look into recovery for the economy. And so the small businesses and our supply chains have kind of seen the effects of how those supply chains have been disrupted through our COVID, you know, during this COVID time. And so definitely want to highlight that there is, you know, a lot of state push and support and effort around strengthening our supply chains and procurement for small businesses, as well from the federal level. Our director was just confirmed as the new administrator for the Small Business Administration, Isabel Guzman. So she had been leading our office for the last 2 years and will be now taking over the SBA. So I would imagine there would be some federal support for our initiatives as well. So that's good news for California. And then also our other areas of focus are e-commerce and global trade. And I'll dive into one of our e-commerce initiatives on this slide here, which is called it's actually called Get Digital California. We just rolled this out in December, and it's a program aimed at promoting e-commerce adoption for small businesses so that they can make the transition into having an online presence. So we developed what's called digital boot camps, and we have a lot of tools and resources for small businesses to engage and kind of make that transition into developing online presence, especially when it comes to a lot of our mom and pop and our micro enterprises, which is one of my focal points. So this program was actually rolled out in the Fresno Central Valley area. So this was rolled out in December. So we're looking for partners for some of our Southern California regions. So I'll be kind of circling back and poking around to see who wants to take part in that for our region. So definitely take advantage of it, or at least pass the information on. And again, please visit business.ca.gov/getdigitalca is the link for that. And here's just some links for our preparedness and disaster preparedness and resiliency links. And again, these are just sites, and please don't feel the need to write any of this down. I'll make all of this available for everyone. So just a visual for just the wildfires, COVID, and any disaster preparedness. There's also like some resource guides and information for you to kind of like assess your own business in terms of how prepared you are for disaster or things of that nature. So there's some real nice tools in there for you. And then lastly, this is the last slide here. And this is just a list of all of the links, resources for small businesses. If you like, you can take a screenshot with your phone, but again, don't write any of these down. And again, please follow us on social media at CalOSBA or California OSBA. We're on Twitter and Facebook, but I believe that we will be moving to Instagram very soon. So, looking forward to that. And again, thank you all for having me. And I'm here for any questions.
Thank you, Chris. Look forward to seeing you on Instagram Live, and a lot of good information packed in there. Our team is going to take the recording, any link shared today, a lot of this information, and put all that information into an email to all registrants for today. Thanks again, Chris. Danny, let's go to you next to hear a little bit about SBDC and some of the great work you and your organization does.
Certainly. Let me grab that as well. So yeah, thank you, Marshall. So as Chris kind of set the stage a little bit, we're a small business development center network. So we provide small business assistance, and we're funded by the U.S. Small Business Administration. They, in essence, provide the charter. And we also are funded by the state of California through Chris's office. And this funding allows us to have our staff of over 120 predominantly part-time expert advisors working on all sorts of things to assist you, the small business owner. Obviously, the last 12 months has been heavily in terms of just response and helping everybody navigate COVID-19 and everything like that. But that's been only part of all of our work. We've continued to work with a lot of businesses because not every business has been severely impacted. We've worked with businesses as they're going through ideation, startup phases, commercialization, and in terms of scaling. We've worked with plenty of businesses as they're even having to continue along as well, operating their businesses and working through things. But today I want to talk about the COVID-19 response. So in particular, I have our website that's there. There's a lot of information we have there, but predominantly what that is that's how you get to our services. Because our services, as I was saying, it's really that we're providing expert assistance. The number one way is one-on-one. Last year alone, we provided almost just over 24,000 hours of one-on-one business consulting. That's where you're meeting, obviously via Zoom now, one-on-one with one of our expert advisors and getting the type of assistance that you need. And all of this is free. That's why it's funded by the U.S. Small Business Administration as well as the state of California. We also do, thousands of training sessions as well, tons and tons of webinars. We have recorded webinars, we have live webinars, we have them that are larger event-based or things like that. So that's really kind of all over the map. And last but not least is when we are able to be open, which, hopefully at some point, we do have 9 service locations throughout San Diego County, as well as some other partner locations where we provide this. But really, we are throughout the community and everywhere for you as well. Wanted to talk a bit about the COVID-19 response. And like Marshall said, there's a lot of information out here. Don't try and digest it all at once because there's a lot of different things out there. But that's also really a lot of what we're here to do is to provide that type of help you kind of go, all right, I'm this type of company with this type of experience or this started there. I have this amount of employees. I'm in this industry, and what really you're able to get. Because we've helped people access over $120 million in capital to date. And that's probably a little bit of an outdated number. That's really from 12/31. And a lot of this has been on the different programs. So you look at the federal programs, the two big ones. Main one I'll talk about is a little bit is the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program. And of course, a lot of folks were able to access and take advantage of the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. There also are, which I'll touch on briefly, two new grant programs. One that was part of the stimulus in December, and then the newest one was part of the American Rescue Plan. And that's the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant and the Restaurant Revitalization Grant. I'm going to be honest with you, they're complicated, especially since the SBA is still figuring it out. That's why we're here. You do not have expertise on how to apply for federal grants. We're here to help you be able to do that. And so it is going to be a bit tricky. So just like Chris was talking about, how we were able to help thousands of folks be able to apply for the California Relief Grant, and still are continuing to do so. We'll continue to do the same for the federal programs, state programs, and of course any sort of their local programs that we've been able to work with folks on. So that's really the main website where you can find out information about the federal programs, as well as there's links on there on exactly how you're able to just input some basic information. And you'll be able to get schedule yourself a simple appointment with one of our advisors to really kind of assess what you need, or if it's just a quick, couple of questions and things like that, such as connecting with the lender, making sure you have your documents ready for your PPP loan. So PPP, that's the big push right now. This is a deadline sensitive one. It is scheduled to close the end of this month. Fingers crossed. The Senate does extend it through the end of May. But we, know it happens. It doesn't happen. We've seen things like that not happen. So I don't want to base on that. So really, if you've not applied for a PPP loan, or if you've not applied for your second draw PPP loan, you really want to do it this week. And because that way, you'll be able to get in. Second is about 2 weeks ago, the SBA really enhanced the rules for sole proprietors. And what do I mean by a sole proprietor? I mean a sole proprietor, self-employed, independent contractor, gig worker, side hustle, all of those types of things. In short, you file a Schedule C for your 1040. You fit in this category. Because up until early March, your loan was based upon your net profit. Like any small business owner, you probably had a lot of business expenses that you claimed in order to reduce your tax burden significantly. The SBA finally understood this, and now the loan is based on your gross revenue. That is a significant difference. We've already seen the difference in loan calculations. It would be between $1,000 and $20,000 for sole proprietors. That is serious money for them to be able to use to pay themselves and to pay their business operating expenses. Key thing to know is, of course, that loans are from banks or other lenders. The other key eligibilities, you had to have been in business, operating, and generating revenue. All those things, in business, operating, and generating revenue prior to February 15th, 2020. So if you started your business after that, unfortunately, there's nothing that is out there. These are based upon lines that are really kind of drawn by the federal government and looking at things from a pre-pandemic situation. So again, to kind of highlight some of those critical updates is if you are still in a priority situation, if you were not able to get a PPP loan, but in particular, if you're a Schedule C filer, you really want to take advantage of that. For all those of you who did get a PPP in 2020, if you have not gotten your second draw and you have this eligibility, which is you're able to demonstrate at least a 25% loss in revenue during 2020 as compared to 2019, you're eligible for a second PPP loan. We've helped hundreds and hundreds of businesses be able to get their second draw PPP loan. It's very advantageous because obviously many, many different businesses did have that impact for them. So this, I don't want to get into too much detail, but really, like I said, you're going to look at line 7, gross income for your payroll calculation if you are a sole proprietor Schedule C filer. Like I said, this is a big, big deal and a big, big difference. And so you're really able to look at that to be able to take that total dollar amount from your 2019 taxes, you divide that by 12, you multiply that by 2.5 for the loan amount. As long as obviously you reduce that amount to $100,000, which is the maximum you're able to claim for the gross revenue. So certainly you're able to do that. Also, if you did not get a PPP loan in 2020 and you are getting your first PPP loan now, you can actually roll your economic injury disaster loan into that PPP loan, pay it off, And then that's also going to significantly help you because that's a much better financing arrangement for you than what the economic injury disaster loan would be. So that's PPP. I'm going to talk briefly about two other programs. One, I've got more information than the other because the other one is so new, there is no information. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about these. Number one is the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant. And so this is also known as Save Our Stages or other terms. This was part of the December stimulus. And so the federal government allocated $15 billion then, and now an additional $7.5 billion. So it's a $22.5 billion program. And these are grants for shuttered venues. Venues such as live music venues, live performances, everything from a music venue or to a theater. It could be a nonprofit or for-profit. It could be a movie theater. That makes sense. It could be a museum. Many different museums are certainly eligible for this. And last would be talent promoters or agencies. Those could be potentially eligible. And so there is a little bit of kind of questions in terms of specifics with eligibility. If you go to our website, we have the link to a nice simple grid that kind of talks about that eligibility. And you can also just schedule an appointment with one of us, and we'll be able to help you be able to certainly look at what that eligibility would be. And so before, until this American Rescue Plan, you wouldn't be able to get a PPP. Now you can. So especially since this has taken time to roll out, again, brand spanking new program the SBA has had to roll out. So it's taken them some time because they want to do it right and not have some problems. You can still apply for a PPP or your PPP2. You just deduct that from the grant amount. So there is a checklist to kind of start to prepare for the application. The application we anticipate probably coming out late March, early April. But the big thing you can do that's included in that is two things. You need to register, make sure your organization has a DUNS number. We can help you with that. It's a free thing. The second is that you're registered with SAM. SAM is, best way to think of it is it's Uncle Sam. And that is registering with the federal government because you have to register with the federal government for this. Also, no cost. DUNS can take less than a day to be able to get the DUNS number. SAM can take upwards of 2 weeks just for it to process to get your number. So it's a good thing to be able to prepare for. The other is the Restaurant Revitalization Grant. So again, this is brand spanking new that came out in the American Rescue Plan with almost $30 billion. There is a $5 billion set aside for very small restaurants that are under $500,000 in revenue. Grants, again, we would presume are going to be like the shuttered venues based on gross revenue. And we do know it will be a ceiling of $10 million. So I think the main thing is since there's literally no information out right now, other than we know that it's probably going to use the same portal, and since the SBA is developing the shuttered venue grant, that's not a bad model to start taking a look at. The two things we absolutely positively know, same thing. Anyone who's doing any type of business or receiving any funds from the federal government has to have a SAM and a DUNS. And so you will need to absolutely register for that. We don't know when this program is going to open, but certainly you can get prepared for that, and we'll be able to assist you absolutely if you don't have your SAM or your DUNS to be able to be registered. So last but not least, we're doing all sorts of other type of assistance as we move into reopening, in terms of the resiliency, the types of things that Chris was talking about. We have our webpage there that's specifically for that. That's, on our website /AdaptSD. We have a number of recorded webinars for best practices. We're regularly updating that. We also have links to a number of both state and local resources kind of talking through there. The state of California in particular has some good information about workplace safety that we also have linked to there. So that's pretty much what, in summary, what we have. I know you're getting a ton of information here. And so I appreciate, the downtown San Diego staff certainly being able to put that out. So that's what I got, Marshall.
Thanks, Danny. And we'll certainly consolidate all that information and get it out to the participants. Danny, thanks for all you do. We'll turn now to Julie, who will discuss some of the great work Deloitte Consulting provides as the workforce moves from recovery to the post-COVID era. Julie, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you. I'm going to talk a little bit about the human experience and what we've all experienced. I think it doesn't really matter if you're a large global public company, a small family enterprise, a nonprofit, a government employee. We've all gone through this human experience that has been something unprecedented. I think that desire for meaningful human connection has really become an important part of work and what we do with our employees and with our customers. that human isolation, a lot of our research has proven that unfortunately it's made our employees less engaged and possibly less productive. The other side of that is that working from home has turned into working all of the time. And there's a blurring between the lines of, I walk down the hallway to wherever I have my desk set up, whether it's in a closet that day or it's in the dining room or it's in a home office, but I'm actually not able to stop my day. And that's actually creating a real need to monitor our employees' mental and physical well-being and health. So what we've been doing is really looking at what are those workforce strategies as we start to go from that response to recovery to getting into thrive coming out of this. I think some of our research has really been extremely productive around the fact that we need to have very transparent communication. We need to have leaders in our small businesses and our large businesses that are very open with their employees, and that we're collecting the concerns and safety concerns of our employees and actually really responding to those. I do have a few slides I'll show you here. And what I want to do is really kind of walk you through the things that you need to think about. We need to reflect on what worked, what didn't work. How do we actually reboot our organization, and how do we change how we actually operate in this future state and rethink those business priorities? I think the business priority aspect of this is something that all of us as business owners and leaders in our community, we need to be conveying to our employees. What are the priorities? Maybe there's work and there's things that we used to do that we're not going to do anymore. It's not a priority. It's not generating money. And maybe there's a whole new operating model and there's a whole new thread of revenue that we've uncovered through e-commerce solutions and online ordering. And we are going to engage with our customers in a very different way. What that means is we possibly need a very different skill set and workforce to be able to take advantage of those opportunities. We have a number of organizations and businesses that have actually taken the unintended consequences of this and realized that there's a whole new revenue thread that they can gather, and they can actually be much more effective and even grow and increase their revenue through other channels and other mechanisms of engaging with their customers. I think what we're going to also have to do is recommit to our employees is we may go back into a workplace environment that's very different. Everybody might not be there. That parking lot may not be full. We may not all be there at the same time, but we need to actually re-engage with our employees and be very overt and communicative with them. I think it's that big leadership, the big L and the little L. The one advantage I think that some of our small businesses have, and especially some of our research has shown this in family enterprises, is trust is actually a currency. And a small business actually has a higher level of trust by their employees, but that organization needs to also trust their employees to do their work and do it in a way where you're not constantly checking in with them if it is in a virtual environment. The same goes for those employees need to have trust in those businesses that they're doing the right thing to get to a recovery state and that they are going to be a viable employer for them. So I think that trust factor is something that we all need to be very conscious of, which means we need to be extremely clear about the priorities, about where we're going and what the plan is. We might need to actually think about that in a different way where we have to actually, maybe change the communication frequency, change the mechanisms with which we communicate with our employees. The rewards and relationships that we have with our employees probably need to be different. I know I personally have set up one-on-one time with some of my key leaders that are engaged at my clients. And I know that this working from home situation has turned into the working all the time. And I might have been less overt about actually scheduling that one-on-one time to connect with them in a personal way in the past world. I might have caught them in the hallway at a client. I might have caught them in, the grabbing coffee in the office. But without those opportunities to do that, I've actually had to put, 20 minutes on the calendar. And it's incredible how getting them to talk about, what are their concerns? What are their fears? Do they want to even come back to an office environment or, a retail setting where they're going to be exposed to things? Do they have somebody at home that has an autoimmune situation that they're very concerned about exposure? So we've been really reflecting and trying to recommit, what our strength of our employees is really that their mental health is strong and that we are really focused on making sure that they feel safe when they do come back into a workforce environment. The other thing that we're finding is a lot of our clients are really taking this as an advantage. You know, if I could look out 3 to 5 years and what our growth trajectory was, well, maybe, you know, real estate and the lease and the per square footage, I was out of space. If I actually rotate how I bring those folks on site, and I have a flex work program where some roles might be able to actually work at home permanently, and some folks might come into that office maybe only 2 days a week, maybe 3 days a week. So I think we're really kind of seeing this as an opportunity to really work differently and do work in a different way. This is kind of the framework. It's, you know, what work needs to get done, what things do we need to change about our workforce, and then what do we need to do about the workplace. So I, again, want to emphasize that I think there are some pretty significant positives that have potentially come out of this. I think it allows for us to introduce some very different flexible opportunities for many of our employees. It also is enabling us to engage with customers in a lot of ways that are very different than we have in the past. And I think that, you know, coming out of this, we'll take the good with the bad, but we've got all these fabulous new learnings that we have around workforce productivity and a remote work environment, and what really is working to help us all get to a recovery state. Thank you, guys. I'm really appreciative to be able to be part of the conversation today.
Thank you, Julie. And I love that response to recovery to thrive. I hope we're all thriving this time next year. We're going to go now to questions, starting with a few that were submitted. Danny, I'll start with you. One thing we continue to hear from businesses in our downtown community is that they're grateful for the local, state, and federal relief, but that sometimes it can be like drinking from a fire hose, trying to decipher and navigate all the resources and websites available. Is there one place people should look to or should be directed to for some of those small business owners?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's what our job is. We understand it's terribly confusing, you know, so let you know, me and my team sit down and wade through all of that and kind of filter it down. Because, you know, then you can come and talk to us. It's at no cost again, nothing, no obligation, fully confidential, no, you know, we don't sell you anything. Our job is literally to help you. And, you know, and so we're the ones kind of figuring that out. So you come and say, okay, this is, you know, this is when I started my business. This is what my, you know, what my industry is. This is how many employees I have. This is where I'm located. This is who I am as an individual. And then we can start looking at what the particular programs are. And you stay in contact with us because it's ever changing. You know, how many different stimulus bills have we had? How many different local programs have we had? We've had, you know, how many rounds of just a California relief grant and different funding times. And it is confusing. And we understand also that there is, you know, that this is a very, very, very stressful time. It's, you know, it truly is the survival of your small business. And, you know, and so lean on us. I mean, that's what our job is. We're here to do, to be able to help you listen, understand what your, you know, your unique business situation is. We don't have a magic wand. We can't solve everything, but we can at least help you find this, you know, the solutions that are the whole, you know, to help you be able to survive with your business.
Thanks, Danny. This next one's for everyone. And before I read it, just a quick reminder, please submit any questions you have using the Zoom Q&A function. With the many ups and downs for businesses during this pandemic, what have you heard is the most important resource businesses need to move from response to recovery? And whoever wants to answer that.
So I'll start real quick, and then I think Chris has got some, because I'll kind of hand it there. So I think there's a couple of things. I think obviously, you know, you know, I think that, you know, both Julie's talked about some great, you know, in terms of understanding your workforce and things like that. You know, for us, what we're looking at is number one is that you're able to kind of navigate and comply with that, or whatever the local, state, public safety rules are, and that you're meeting what those particularly are. And we can kind of help you with that. We're able to work with, you know, the different local entities. We have a great relationship with county public health, you know, and also the state has some fantastic resources. And I'll kind of hand that to Chris, but, you know, from the Blueprint for Success, as well as, you know, as the California Labor Fed, they have some great information on workplace safety.
Right. You know, and just to piggyback on Danny's point, obviously, following the safety guidelines and reopening safely, will be of the utmost importance. But I think also, in addition to that, from the state's perspective, we want to make sure that as we go through this recovery, that that is fully inclusive. And I think that obviously for our special emphasis groups and persons of color, but also from a geography standpoint, is something that we as a state have looked at in terms of making sure our programming and the things that we're supporting are fully inclusive of not only our individuals, but also the geography of where they're from. And so I live in Inland Empire, so I get a lot of that with LA. So from my perspective, it's just wanting to make sure that the programming and the things and resources that we're developing, and I can go down a laundry list of different, programs and things, but I think that the core essence of it all is that it's fully inclusive and that we're there for all types of businesses, no matter, what background they come from. So as we go through recovery, we don't want it to be just the same groups who have benefited before, or the same people that have been left out will continue to be left out, is more how I should have better stated that. But so that's more so the mindset and the thinking that we're leading into going and developing programs. And Danny and his team are at the lead of mostly all of it. So it's great to be able to collaborate with you in this, Daniel, and thank you all again for having me.
And Chris, thanks for shouting out the IE. I went to the Claremont colleges, so go Sage Hens. Julie, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think the biggest tool that we can have right now is flexibility. We just need to understand that, things are changing so fast. Our employees have expectations, our customers have expectations. And so we need to have everything really through a lens of flexibility. And what we're doing this week might be very different from what we do 3 weeks from now.
Thanks, Julie. Julie, we'll stick with you. Our nation was reintroduced to the critical work of our life science industries and what they bring to the table because of the pandemic. What do you think is in store for San Diego's life science industry in the future, and how will they play a part in our regional recovery?
So Marshall, that's a great question, and we would call an innovation ecosystem, much like Tel Aviv, Shanghai, Boston. And we have a fabulous set of research institutes, universities, higher education that are generating upwards of 7,000 STEM professionals a year. And because of that, we've got this incredible scientific and innovation base here. The diagnostic aspect of some of our organizations that are here are going to be clearly at the forefront of the future of health. And I think as we start to disperse and the testing, we look at organizations like Quidel, we look at the genetic and genomic part of this. I mean, it accelerated that launch of 3 vaccines in a time period within a year. The fastest vaccine development that we've ever had before was about 4 years for the mumps vaccine. I mean, it's a clear example of great leadership, being very clear about the priorities. And I look at the ecosystem in San Diego between the genomics and research and diagnostics and personalized medicine. I mean, we're really, all of these organizations are at the forefront of what the future of health will be. So I'm really excited about the organizations we have here, that scientific community, and what this means for San Diego for the future.
Thanks, Julie. Chris, let's jump back to you. Recently, the Golden State stimulus was signed, offering more Californians relief. Can you speak to some of the components of that package designed to deliver relief directly to business owners, and maybe speak a little bit to that $2 million for small business grants and license renewal waivers?
Right. Yeah. So with the package, obviously there's a laundry list, and I won't go through them all. But I think the ones that are relevant to my office as well as small businesses, obviously, is the $2.075 billion. That was allocated in grants to small businesses, which I kind of detailed through my presentation. And so that will be equally dispersed throughout these 4 rounds that are going. In addition to that, obviously there'll be emergency $2.2 billion in emergency rental assistance. And you actually, to really get some of the granular details of that, you would need to go to the state website for that, and I can get that link for you. But there'll be 2.2 billion in emergency rental assistance. There's a lot of business owners that haven't been able to, make their rent and mortgage and things of that nature. So there'll be some assistance to support and help business owners with that. And then also the franchise tax board will, they have, I guess, oversight over the license renewal waivers, which is something, the businesses have been asking about. So I'm not as, the expert on that one. I'm sorry, Department of Consumer Affairs. But so with the fee waivers, that's a Department of Consumer Affairs thing. That's their office, and they have oversight over that. But essentially, it's providing waivers for businesses to go back and start operating and things of that nature. And so there's an additional 3.8 billion set aside for the childcare sector. So there'll be funding for families as well as businesses who are in the childcare sector. So with each of these things, and I could go down the list, but with each of these things, they're going to have a lot of granular pieces to them. But I think for the small businesses, the grant program, the fee waivers, as well as any of the tax relief programming that I alluded to in my presentation will be of the most, that and the rental assistance obviously will be of the most interest to the business owners. But in addition to that, there's funding for homelessness and transit assistance and vaccine distribution in addition. So there's a lot in that package, but I think, from what I covered, those are the relevant aspects for small businesses.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, a lot to unpack there. Thanks for consolidating that all down for us. Danny, we'll start with you, but welcome anyone to give a crack at this one. Obviously, every business adapts differently. Are there any trends that you're seeing that seem to be paying off that you would recommend to others? For example, some are appointing COVID-19 internal leads. Others are changing their procurement processes, especially with regards to PPE. Are there any best practices that you would recommend businesses employ?
Honestly, it's a low-hanging fruit of just digitizing and really making sure that your business is able to function that way. And that can be literally as basic as make sure your hours and your contact information is up to date on Google and other type of search engines. And I mean, just from those very, very basics, all the way, as then you move up, as you're able to then put your services online, in terms of either if you're selling a product, on ways in which you're able to then continue that distribution, you're providing a service, how that's necessarily able to translate to a digital environment. But really what that's probably the number one best practice that has been there. Has been, really starting to digitize, some of your operations, because even we were seeing this pre-pandemic that the trend was going that way, and then this just put it into overdrive. And, yes, we will go back to some degrees. I mean, as of today, we can go and, 25% capacity in restaurants. So there will be some degree of that, but I think that's something that I think really is going for those low-hanging fruit types of situations.
And Marshall, I would comment on that one too. I know our hospitality and restaurant practice has found that some of the success stories are the kitchen is actually going to grow and become larger because of this digitization. So I have an online customer now that I didn't have before. Nobody ordered takeout from, this type of restaurant before. You might actually even have a drive-up thing that reads the license plate. So when you do your order, you log in your license plate and it recognizes, okay, take this order out to that car that's in this space. So, you never would have thought you have a restaurant business that has a chief digital officer, but I think that so many of these small businesses are going to be transformed by some of this e-commerce and digital enablement that really are going to potentially be a huge growth opportunity for them.
That's interesting. Yeah, I know some of my favorite cash-only restaurants have switched to the Square reader. Chris, did you have anything to add before we move on?
Sorry, no, I think everyone covered that. Nothing to add.
Perfect. Julie, let's stick with you, and thank you for bringing up the mental health of employees. What should employers be mindful of, especially bringing employees back to the physical workspace? Any changes in business practices or professional development strategies that should be employed there?
Yeah, we had started something prior to this where it was just really tracking the energy level. We looked at travel days and things like that. So we were really trying to get a read on how is that impacting our individual employees? What are the programs that we can offer them? And how can we actually create an environment that fosters some sense of authenticity and transparency? So if I'm sharing with our younger people that I'm stressed about being able to fit everything in, and if we can have our leaders be very open and honest about the balancing of kids having been at home and trying to manage school while you're also trying to log into a conference call and the dog's running through the room and barking. I think we just really have got to be a lot more open to there's flexibility that needs to be offered. We're going to have the honest conversation of, given some folks' home situations, they may not be able to come back to a work environment in the way that we expect them to. And so is there a way to accommodate them in another role? Do we need to switch roles? Do we need to actually, modify where we're actually seeking, employees, because some of our folks may not come back?
This next question is not self-serving, I promise, but tax season is here. Are there any tips and tricks with respect to tax filings that people should be aware of this year? And I'll leave that open-ended for anyone.
Well, it looks like as of today, we might actually get another month or so.
Yeah, so I think there's certainly that, but we've the stimulus, the bill that passed in December, and even then the most recent, so there are a couple of things. The biggest change was that your PPP, the forgivable portion, is not considered taxable, and you can continue to use your business expenses for that. I think the other one is, for any business that has employees, have a good conversation with your CPA about the employee retention tax credit. It is a very significant federal tax credit, and a lot of that, in terms of a lot of benefits. And so I think those are kind of the two real big ones that there are there. And, and I know Chris talked about a bunch, from the state level as well. So.
Feverishly writing notes. Go ahead, Chris.
No, yeah, I'm probably gonna stay away from the tax thing, but I think that with how things are rolling out, there's just a lot of information that we need to decipher through. And so, going and finding support like Daniel and his team, and his network, they'll be able to kind of flesh all those details out, because I'm not the tax expert at all. So that's something I'll be navigating as well.
Perfect. We'll have time for a couple more questions. Chris, I'm glad you brought up the inclusivity factor. What is being done to help reach some of those perhaps historically underrepresented or underserved communities throughout the state?
Right. Yeah. So first off, right offhand, we're working on a statewide procurement initiative. Had yet to be announced, but we're looking at ways to be fully inclusive in terms of looking at incorporating rural businesses with our statewide partners such as Caltrans, GovOps, but also from a corporate perspective. Can't name any names as of yet, and Danny's leading that charge as well on the corporate side. So we're looking at a public and private, collaboration to be fully inclusive for all small businesses, both from a rural perspective. So we're also looking at our internal support networks and how we're structured, and are we able to reach the communities that that we're serving adequately? Do we have enough staffing or things of that nature, or is the information out there? Do we need more resources deployed? And so we're looking at all ways in terms of how we're going to roll out things, but also we're taking feedback from our statewide partners. So this isn't like a state top-down thought process. We're incorporating all of our partners from all sectors to provide us input to help us kind of navigate and understand where best to deploy resources for maximum gain and maximum growth for small businesses. And obviously my role as the advisor, I talk to the small businesses directly. So I get to hear the good, bad, and indifferent from them. And so I have that luxury to go back and speak to our partner agencies and to Sacramento and say, hey, well, this may be the perception, but this is what the small business owners are telling us. So I get to be that thorn in the side, and I like that role. But I think that for us, it's just continuing to be, I know one of you all said being agile. I think that's like that really hit home for me, because as being government, it's really hard for us to be agile in that sense. And so relying on our partners and our networks to kind of help us and help inform us of, kind of what the small business community is saying, how should we best, address things or fill gaps or, those types of things. And so with that, the output has been a lot more focus and emphasis on, connecting with our more rural areas, maybe looking at more non-traditional partners. We have our big, support mechanisms and TA providers throughout the state, but some of our far-reaching areas, there may be, those smaller, non-traditional type of, organizations. And so how do we incorporate them into the overall, ecosystem? And so, I think about Imperial Valley as one area adjacent to our San Diego area that, obviously one of our, areas that's, has a lot of room for growth and, needs some attention in terms of resources and, development and industry and all those things. And so how can we help support that? How can we, help the community, the people that are living there? And so when we go through these economic development type of plans, we're looking at it from I guess an ancillary perspective, because when you talk about industry sector, you've got education, you've got workforce, and all these things kind of trickle down effects to that. And so what does that mean for the community? Does that help or hurt those communities that we're engaging with on a long-term basis? Does that increase the educational attainment levels, the salary levels, the works? And so those are the things we're trying to assess. But I think that those things have kind of led us to, we need to really focus more on our more underserved areas and people in terms of inclusivity, because we have no doubt that we're going to roar back as a state. But we want to make sure that we have everyone that's roaring back with us as part of that process. So that's the best way I could probably summarize that.
Couldn't agree more. Thanks, Chris. I see that we're coming up on time, so we would just like to say a huge thank you to our sponsor, Kavanagh and Associates, for making this session possible. A big thank you to all of our speakers for joining us today to share their expertise and insight, and a thank you to all of our participants who tuned in for this session. If you're interested in additional opportunities to and learn more from regional experts, we encourage you to sign up for our email list to receive information on the next Fed and Educated session. We also invite you to consider a membership with the Downtown Partnership if these kinds of conversations would help your organization recover and thrive. We will be making a recording of this webinar available tomorrow in our follow-up email to participants. With that, stay safe, stay strong. We look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you all.